when you scale at this size, you have to be more rigid about your processes. All right, cool. So yeah, you can kind of see I call myself the grumpy old man, sort of in my group at work, because you can probably see here I've been in design for a long time. It's been 20 years, so that's definitely the first 10 years of that were closer to something like print design, traditional graphic design, and then about 10 years in UX. So yeah, and 3 major corporations. So I'm very comfortable working. I would say I'm more comfortable working on at a massive company than I am at a small company. Definitely learned how to navigate sort of the corporate structures. So yeah, that's been fun on occasion, and I'm also a certified Scrum product owner, so have a lot of experience just kind of in going through the whole agile process, doing backlogs, sprints, running sprints, all of the typical things that a Scrum leader does, and then the coding section here, Elliot. I always feel a bit reluctant to even list this on here. The way I like to put it to the engineers on my team is I know enough code to completely screw up everything. It has been helpful, by the way, in communication with engineers and with the development team. But been a number of years since I've been a number of years since I've sat there and actually run through the code before, or run through code with my team. So, so as far as tooling outside of the coding sphere, I really, when I first started, there wasn't much for UX, actually. There really just wasn't much there. At that point in the industry, we were honestly, sounds kind of ridiculous to say these days, but we were using a lot of Photoshop and InDesign. There were all sorts of early tools, if anybody remembers them, like Just in Mind. And Balsamic was a popular solution. It was really pure UX. It was a lot of whiteboarding, a lot of low fidelity stuff. Balsamic is still pretty good for that, honestly. But I was prototyping in Adobe InDesign, using it for its Flash export capabilities. So pretty interesting. And then Sketch came along, and it was like, it's a huge breath of fresh air. It was amazing. And then of course had a second wind of that experience with Figma. So these have been kind of the major revolutions, right, in the UX tooling space. But especially as someone who has worked somewhat on the coding side, I've actually worked on design. I've told Elliot, I think I've told you this before, actually. I've worked on the side of actually doing the design and then having to be an engineer on the same project, right. and then consume my own designs. And so at the phase that Sketch had come out, and it was kind of like we weren't quite to Figma yet, and then Zeplin came out of nowhere, and that was really a revolution because it was really the first dedicated design to dev handoff tool that I had used or encountered, and was just a significant improvement across the board. Literally nothing like that existed. And it really allowed if somebody has some engineering experience in the room, they'll understand this, but I'll just give you a very simple example, Elliot. I used to do a bunch of SVG exports for a particular app I was working on. So, SVG file format. So I would export those straight out of Sketch back in the day. For anybody that has tried to consume an SVG or call an SVG that has come out of Sketch, you get all sorts of garbage code in that it wouldn't even render actually on the engineering side. So running that exact same thing through Zeppelin, just like one of those neat little features that's like in the background of
Right.
Zeppelin, and like frankly, you guys don't advertise it that much, and it's like
Hmm.
it's one of those
We'll have
things
to
that like
take
from an
notes.
engineering, yeah, you actually should. It runs it through an SVGO compressor.
Hmm.
Which typically is a separate thing you had to do, and so it automatically does that. It cleans up the code, it strips it down to just the coordinates and the colors, and then rendered perfectly in the app. And so that's just like a small example of the things that
Hmm.
Zeppelin did that, again, you didn't even really talk about that made engineers' lives significantly easier.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's definitely something I think that our marketing team will take notes on. Start advertising that on the front page
Yeah, definitely. All those little things you do in the background are actually vastly important to the flow.
for sure. Yeah, tell us
So
about your team structure.
yeah. So I remember when we were talking about having this conversation, Elliot.
Mhm.
Like, I don't even know how many employees we have, but I don't know where you pulled this number, but I am sure it's right, or it's
Uh-huh.
probably too conservative. Frankly, like we're a huge company, so but my team is relatively small in the grand scale of that. So I think a lot of people are surprised to learn just how small design teams can be at these large corporations. Like my team in particular is only 4 members. I'm the design lead, and then I've got 3 UX designers that work on my team. That's it. So it's a team of 4, and we're supporting about 200 people, at least 40 developers. And I would say conservatively, we support 20 external partner teams. And you can imagine being the video team at Amazon, being UX, that means any time a team within the company wants to show a video on their experience or on their page, that literally comes through these 4 UX designers. So it is a massive job. And yeah, I like to say UX is a horizontal among verticals. This is absolutely true, and it gives us a very good sort of through line. So we see like essentially, like, okay, I'll just give you an example within my department, Elliot. I think this will be a good
Mhm.
way to explain it. So we have an acquisition team, we have a distribution team, we have a selection and sciences team, we have all of these teams, right? And all
Right.
these teams are focused only on their what we would call vertical, right? Whereas UX is horizontally supporting all of these individually.
Mhm.
And so and that includes external partners, other teams. So it's pretty amazing how much work comes through a horizontal in that situation. And so like tools like Zeppelin are not a option, like for our teams. Like we have to have like Zeppelin. Like we have to have that level of like communication and final handoff and like specificity, because if we don't, like, there's absolutely no way we could support like this many
Right.
partners, this many people internally. I mean, I can just tell you, all of my designers, including me, I mean,
Mhm.
we're juggling many projects. I would
Right.
say upwards of 10 projects each at any given time.
Mhm.
So yeah, absolutely, tools like Zeppelin are 100% necessary for our team.
Yeah.
There's no way we could scale to this sort of
Uh-huh.
support, and we've just seen a massive increase in work in the past
Mhm.
few years. So
Definitely. Definitely.
yeah,
So take us in, I guess this is about more like that kind of like an example or like what's complicated about that design and dev collaboration, especially at scale.
yeah. Well, everything is complicated at that scale, but you've got it on this slide. Actually, this is kind of the hard part about modern software development is, what it would be nice if everything was kind of like, bucketed, and it was kind of an A to Z sort of process. It doesn't
Mhm.
work out that way. like a lot of times you are, the example in the slide is you're building the plane while you're flying it, right?
Mhm.
And that is really what it feels like. Like things are dynamically changing. You're having conversations even after handoff. You're getting into these conversations where a PM comes in and says, "Well, we need this change, and we need to support this new use case." You have scope creep, you have scope increase, and you have to go back, talk to engineering. Obviously, having that conversation on the design is pretty
Right.
critical.
Uh-huh.
We don't like I think you have it on the slide. Like, I think designers deal with the fluidity of that situation a little
Mhm.
better because, like, our tools are really kind of made for it. Like, Figma's made to do quick iteration,
Mhm.
and I always say I can like make a pretty picture really easily. It's like handing it off and making it something that engineers can implement is the hard part, right?
Yeah.
And of course, on the engineering side, they actually have to do the true work of implementation, of bringing that to life, of coding it
Mhm.
together, and so that you've got to have some transparency in that process between PM to UX and then UX to engineering. Like, if you don't have transparency, all of that building the plane while it's flying is impossible. Like, you
Mhm.
can't, especially at this scale. I mean, we're talking like, again, 200 people. We're talking like maybe there's 10 or 15 engineers just on one project. Like, you
Mhm.
cannot scale that conversation. You can't just have an impromptu meeting for every
Right.
single decision that
Can't
gets
sync.
made.
Yeah, I can't sync ad hoc with like 200 people.
Exactly. Yeah. So collaboration is obviously super challenging without some way to actually like have those conversations and have them specifically on the designs
Mhm.
that we're implementing. And of course, there's plenty of features that I'm sure we'll talk about maybe a little later, which within Zeppelin that allow you to see diffs between different version commits, and
Mhm.
so we of course have those threaded conversations
Right.
inside the app that make that actually possible.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. It's kind of hard sometimes to get like two or three people on a call, so I can't imagine trying to get like any more than five. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's really difficult. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, designers and developers like have like this core unification, like this core point of unity. In most cases, like there's always going to be, like we've talked. I think Elliot, you and I have probably, in the lead up to
mhm.
this talk, we've kind of like discussed personalities, right? Like,
Right.
obviously there's going to be in every company where we're going to have people we conflict with or personalities we conflict with,
Mhm.
but like generally the assumption, like, and I think the best way to look at most people at work is we're all kind of going after the same thing, right? Like,
Right.
designers and developers are going after the same thing. I've seen a lot
Mhm.
of instances where designers and developers will butt heads with each other, right?
Mhm.
And I think there's a misunderstanding between the two sides where, like, sometimes the flexibility and kind of everything that designers bring to the table really conflicts with like the precision and like
Mhm.
and sort of the efficiency that developers need. But at the end of the day, we want to ship a good product. That is, like,
Right.
there's very few people that go into work and say like, I want to make the crappiest app possible, like, something I would be ashamed to put in my portfolio. Like, no one's doing that, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so we do care about the user experience. We do care about making a high quality
Mhm.
product. And so the question is really, how do we facilitate like handoff in such
Mhm.
a way that it actually like makes that process easy for both sides,
Right.
and honestly builds relationships.
Mhm.
Like, it builds that sort of open door sort of policy back and forth of having engineers and designers talking with each other constantly. It
Right.
really does build relationships
Yeah.
that are critical to delivering a good product. And
Mhm.
so yeah, I think we need we share common goals. We need a common solution, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think this is a little bit like kind of this slide. This is a little bit what I was just discussing, which is
Right.
that like the early phase of design tends to be very messy. Like we tend to throw things, like even the most organized of designers, will have like, I know I personally will have like 60 screens, thrown
Mhm.
together, different variants and that sort of thing. And then as I'm going through reviews and I'm talking to PMs, I'm talking to stakeholders, and we're refining. It starts to get straight. It starts that line gets less squiggly. It starts to get more straight, and I'm starting to like, okay, this is what the final design is. And then using a tool like Zeplin allows you to make that final commit, right? Literally a commit. It's like you're committing a version into Zeplin, and so it allows you to say, yes, this is it. This is going to be the final design. I'm going to hand it off.
Mhm.
And then it gives really developers, engineers, like a very, very specific, very rigid set of requirements and screens that they can then take as
Mhm.
final,
Right.
final, right? So yeah, I think this is critical to have like something in between the design phase and this sort of more rigid development
Right.
phase. Like
Right.
you've got to have something in there
Mhm.
that filters all of that chaos into
Mhm.
something that's clean
Right.
and
It's like,
understandable,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the chaos in Figma is like not necessarily a bad thing, I think, for designers, right? Like
No.
I yeah, that's
Yeah.
like kind of a necessity almost, is to have that freedom, the creative freedom to operate like that.
Yeah, it's
It's
the
just
advantage, right? It's
yeah.
the
Right.
advantage of our design tools to give us the most flexibility possible. And but
It's just
like,
been going back into when developers are looking back, they don't necessarily want to see like that the whole like, all the ideation that got there and the squiggly parts.
yeah, it's a mess, and like and the truth is like you can look, Elliot, you can look at you can take three different designers and you can say like you can look at their designs, you can look at their Figma docs, and they're all going to be arranged completely different. Like
Mhm.
no matter how hard you try to enforce consistency there, like
Mhm.
you're going to, especially in this, we're talking about scalability,
Right.
especially at scale. This is like you're never let's increase it to a team of 20 designers, right?
Mhm.
How are you going to enforce the consistency there, like across the
Right.
board? You can try, and
Mhm.
you can definitely do it through mechanisms of force, right?
Mhm.
But it's much easier to just have it funnel through a more rigid like
Right.
system, and then let that system actually handle, like, essentially bringing unity to all
Right.
of the designs
Right.
that the engineering side sees.
And
So
it still allows that creative freedom on either side.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's very poignant.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, culture for sure. Yeah, so again, it's that transparency, it's the open door policy for like engineers to come to design after we deliver the final design in Zeppelin, for engineers to come back and say like, hey, I can't tell you how many times and how much I appreciate it when engineers, like, I deliver a design to Zeppelin, I'll have an
Mhm.
engineer come back and say, Adam, like this actually doesn't scale in this way, or you
Mhm.
forgot about this one outlier scenario, and
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, do you feel like an idiot for a minute as a designer, as a UX designer? Yeah, of course. It's like I immediately my response is, oh, I should have thought about that.
Mhm.
That's on me. I should have been the one to like think about that. But then it allows me to go in and make that iteration, like communicate that to the engineer and say like, in the comments, say like, okay, yeah, I'll go back and fix this. And by the way, one of the niceties of Zeppelin, and like I don't think people like really think about this too much, like maybe on a small scale, but in a big company this is really important. When you're having those threaded conversations with engineers, it's also emailing. Like,
Mhm.
it's also, like, copying to an email, like, it's
Right.
going through
Right.
Outlook, and so it's actually, like, it's actually tracking this conversation in a very public way that is super critical. Like, we like a lot of companies, I think a lot of us kinda use, like, tools like Slack, and we're just kinda having these, like, conversations, and, you know, I don't know. I haven't made this comparison before, Elliot, but I just thought
Mhm.
about it. Like Slack is basically like it's like Sketch or Figma, right? It's like
Mhm.
it's kind of messy. It's like, but you can make quick decisions. You can
Right.
iterate really fast.
Go
But
back and forth.
when it's a plan of record thing, we always email
Yeah.
because we want like a paper trail, right? We want like
Right.
that
Right.
old paper trail.
Mhm.
And there's like something to that like more definable chunk that then, then
Mhm.
exists with a paper trail in it, very similar to kind of the way Zeppelin operates, where I have a very clear list of changes on a per screen basis.
Mhm.
So yeah, like looking at point two, tackling issues as soon as possible. Yeah, this is sometimes I think this just happens naturally with number one.
Mhm.
So you're going to see these issues, or you're going to have more kind of proactive communication on issues before things even have to go to QA if you have that transparency and that open door with engineers. um, One of the steps that I go a little further with my team, and like I would say this is probably more controversial maybe, but I think it's super super useful, is typically in large, I mean any large corporation I've been in, you have the engineering team essentially delivering during their sprints what we call code
Mhm.
reviews. So like they'll deliver like a snippet of a feature and they'll say like I had tried to implement this button and when you press it it turns green or something, right? Like, and so that'll be a code review. Typically those
Mhm.
only run inside the engineering department. It's
Right.
actually quite
Right.
rare for like designers to get involved in that
Mhm.
process. I get involved in that process. Like, if one of our designers is on a project, they are included in those code reviews. So does that results in a lot of emails? I think I have somewhere between 20 and 30 code reviews a day that come
Mhm.
through my inbox. But it gives so much visibility. This is back to kind of that visibility conversation. It's like,
Mhm.
yes, you have it in Zeppelin, and then you also have it on the implementation of the code itself.
Right.
And by the way, I can call back to the Zeppelin screen if something's
Mhm.
wrong. I go like, okay, yeah, it was supposed to turn green, it actually turned red. So
Mhm.
by the way, here's the link to the Zeppelin. Like
Right.
this is
What I
where that
should
we had this is where
correct.
we had the conversation. This is a
Yeah.
link to the actual requirement,
Uh-huh.
like the chat, right? Because that's another beautiful thing about Zeppelin that I haven't mentioned too much, is old school like linking, like just
Mhm.
linking to like something, and then putting that into a document,
Right.
like a business requirements document for a project, is a super super big advantage
Mhm.
to Zeppelin, because it's not just the project that's linkable. It's like it's every single chat, it's every single requirement, it's every
Right.
single like flow segment. Like any small detail you can think of in Zeppelin
Mhm.
is really like you can generate a permalink to that,
Mhm.
and you can pretty well depend that that permalink is not going to change, because unlike often in a design tool where I'm like adding and deleting screens and stuff, I'm actually just continuing to refresh a delivered screen in
Mhm.
Zeppelin and then keeping a very complete version history. So anyway, I definitely get involved at the code review
Mhm.
stage. And by the way, what one last point on this, Elliot, that I
Mhm.
think is important is it actually saves the company money in the long run,
Mhm.
because what typically happens if you don't do this, if you don't have this open door between designers and developers, like what will happen is you'll get to the end of the process and something won't be right. Somebody
Mhm.
won't be happy, right? And this is usually like a week before we ship, and everybody's like, designers are going, no, this doesn't look right, this doesn't act right, and PMs are going, we have to ship in a week, it doesn't matter. And engineers get stuck in the middle.
Mhm.
Engineers get just completely they just get completely slammed between UX and PMs. They get crushed. And so
Mhm.
what they have to do is a litany of changes that creates instability within like a week. And
Right.
so that costs a lot of money, and often you have to push back dates, which also costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so it really having this this idea of like continuous development, continuous transparency, continuous open door, like really does save you significant money, because by the time the design team sees the final thing, there's usually not that much wrong. We usually don't have a lot to critique because we've already seen it 20 times.
Right.
So, it's just really fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like something that, you know, you're mentioning, even these like smaller issues that maybe like Zeplin addresses, they sound like small when you talk about it just like in its own instance, but like everything you're talking about again is multiplied at scale at Amazon, especially, right? So
oh yeah,
all these little time savings and all these like blockers, they, you know, they get even larger when you're supporting a team of 200 people plus 20 external teams, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, this is like a quick kind of like what you were mentioning before.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's all these like invisible little inefficiencies that we don't often think about, at least at kind of in a management level. But when you're on the ground and you're a UX or you're an engineer, you deal with this stuff constantly. And without anything in between your raw design and the ultimate dev team or the engineering team, is a way we would use it. It's messy. I think we get to this a little bit later, Elliot, in my presentation, but like it is just at its core, like we'll see it, I think, in the screenshots. It's very clear like how much messier, like looking at someone's design file that has 20 versions of the same all stacked on top of each other. And depending on the designer, some of it might be clean for one designer, it might be incredibly messy for another designer. That's really hard, and it's really hard to communicate. This is, you know, I go back to the old file naming thing, Elliot, that used to happen a long time ago. I think this still I think some designers still do this. I used to put final at the end of the final, and I'm like, yeah, no, this is really for real, the final, right? I would always have this like name at the end of a process that was like, you know, like 100 characters, right? And it ultimately what you do is you kind of get that same thing in the design tools, like in Sketch or in Figma. You kind of get the like, oh, it's final. No, I promise this one.
This time
like, I'm going to draw a big green box around this screen. You know, this is the one that you should use. You know, so yeah, it absolutely creates some mistrust and some miscommunication. And we've actively seen that before. By the way, we've literally just seen engineers click on the wrong page.
Yeah.
So it's like they'll literally just be on the wrong page, like within the Figma file. And it's like, no, you're supposed to be on this page.
Right.
And so it's like, so we're constantly fighting that. Like, is it possible? Yes. Does it create miscommunication and rework? Absolutely. It does.
Right. And it goes back to like what you said, I think, about you know, Figma, like you said, designers are not all the same. So if an engineer knows where to look for one designer, he may not know where to look for the other designer, right? And that just compounds the problem, I think.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, we don't have to go into it too much. We're probably running short on time, Elliot, because I've told you before I can probably talk for 3 or 4 hours about all this.
We'll do a part 2.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2 for sure. Even Zeplin's integration with tools like Visual Studio Code, with Slack, with like Jira, like actually being able to have the Zeplin screens directly on the user stories, like these are all like super nice things to have. Like not all teams have access to all these tools, but like if you do, oh man, it is fantastic. Like it is so great to have those designs perfectly integrated with your project planning. So and with your code.
Yeah. As a part-time coder.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You know, I've been there. So for sure. Yes. This one is the screen I was talking about, Elliot. It's just, I mean, it's a mess. So, and frankly, this is actually a pretty clean one. Like, you know, this is not too bad. I've seen worse. Let's just put it that way.
Mhm.
And yeah, it is possible, but it's just hard. You look at this. I mean, I mean, most of the people on this call, I would imagine, are UX designers. Like, we know how to create hierarchy, we know how to create focus. You look at this, is there a lot of hierarchy and focus to this if I'm looking for one specific feature, or maybe I'm just looking for one button, right? Like, there is this task, by the way. It actually creates work on the designer's part as well.
Mhm.
You essentially, let's say if you don't use a tool like Zeppelin, you have to recreate it as
Mhm.
best you can within the design software. You have to make the buckets that Zeppelin kind of generates for you just by default. You have to actually like recreate those things inside of your design tool, and it's a lot of work. I mean, it frankly is a lot of work. You have to do a lot of documentation, and to me, it's kind of like a bit going backward in time, to when I was having to. It's gonna point out my age again. I was having to deliver literally like PDFs with like, this is like 10 pixels, this is 20 pixels, this is, and it's like, the less designers have to do that, the better. And
Mhm.
frankly, like, if you have a change, you've got to re-render that, or you've got to resubmit that, right?
Right.
Whereas in Zeppelin, all I've got to do is, and let's say if I change a gap from 20
Mhm.
pixels to 10 pixels, right? And then I send that screen to Zeppelin. It's going to auto update that screen. I can add a comment about the commit, and then the engineer is actually going to be able to click and see the diffs between, okay, it was previously 20 pixels, now it's 10 pixels, right?
Mhm.
And then, of course, if you're using Slack, they'll get an update in Slack about it. It's just, yeah, it's really, really incredible for sort of communicating those things. So, yeah, obviously, the solution is documenting in Zeppelin.
Mhm.
So, which I think, you can look at this. It doesn't take someone it doesn't take a lot of intelligence. Let's just put it that way, to look at this and go, this is a lot cleaner. This is a lot more understandable, especially if I've got 20 engineers. I'm saying this engineer is dedicated to these 5 screens, this engineer is dedicated to these 5 screens. I can easily see the differences here in the left panel. I can see requirements and behaviors that all automatically show up in the right panel. And then, of course, I can just click through. You're not showing this, but I can just click
Mhm.
on this design and, of course, see all of the measurements, all of the different specifications. And we won't even go into things like style guides and,
Mhm.
and, of course, flows. Which one of the big advantages there is that I can literally split up a flow into different groups, and then I
Mhm.
can permalink those flows to
Right.
the appropriate team that's responsible for that part of the flow. So,
Mhm.
so yeah, just so much cleaner here.
Mhm.
So much more
Less screen
understandable.
focus. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's just like, even in a document heavy culture, like a lot of big corporations, and including Amazon, we still have a lot of just documents, right? We
Mhm.
just have a lot of digital documents, and that's the way these projects are still tracked even to this day. And it's a lot easier to go in here and say, like, I can provide a link to this screen, and it will always be the link to this screen, no matter what happens, right?
Mhm.
Like, it will always be the same link, or it will
Right.
always be the same behavior, right?
Mhm.
And so that's just so dependable, and it's so nice to be able to, like, just link directly to inside of documents, just say, hey, just go here. Like,
Yeah.
this is where this is discussed, right?
Yeah. So I think
So,
in Figma that link might change, right? Or it might break if there's changes made.
yeah, I mean, Figma, and we should give credit where credit's due. I mean, Figma has done a better job of doing linking,
Mhm.
as of late, but it's like the comments. It's still
Mhm.
messy. It's still, there is versions, but then if you look at the versions, it's like every single ridiculous change. It's every
Mhm.
autosave. It's every, it's very hard for an engineer to go in there and look at that list and go like,
Mhm.
yeah, like I'm gonna find the exact change that I was looking to understand. That's difficult. And it's also true that like generally in Figma, I'm kind of like I'm working a little looser with the designs, right? And so I'm not delivering, I'm not coming down the mountain, so to speak, with these like, with these like this perfect design and saying, this is what you should develop, engineers, I'm changing screens a lot. And if I delete that screen, I re-add it, I do something like that link's gone. That link is forever gone. Whereas I can literally, even in Figma, come up with a new screen, rename it with the same name, export it to Zeplin, and it's going to update the screen that had that original name in Zeplin. So I maintain that link in Zeplin, even though I've completely broken it in Figma. And so that's kind of where this sort of like all these little, it's kind of like what I was describing earlier, Elliot, like all these little niceties that Zeppelin does that I think it's a little difficult to communicate all of
Mhm.
these in a significant way. But when you put them all together, they kind of like
Mhm.
add up to more than the sum of their parts.
And
So
also, again, I keep saying this just because I'm always in awe of like the size of Amazon, but just those tiny things and then all at scale becomes like something even crazier.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Sorry, I like the slide. It's just this is insane. You don't have to be obviously as a designer I know what's going on here, right? Like
Mhm.
I get it. But it just kind of points out how bad it can get
Mhm.
when engineers are looking at, in particular, files that are not organized super well on the design side.
Mhm.
It's this is what an engineer can encounter in Figma. And yeah, it's obviously scary,
Right.
and not great. So yeah, flows and Zeppelin are much clearer. So yeah, this is much easier, much more, again, intentional. And I think this is something, Elliot, I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking
Mhm.
about this slide.
Mhm.
um it's friction.
Mhm.
There is some friction to this. Like I'm not gonna sugarcoat the fact that like as a like obviously you guys aren't paying me for this. I don't work for Zeppelin. Like I couldn't, honestly. It would be a massive conflict of interest. And so like the truth is like I do a lot of flows in Figma. And like and when I bring these over, there is some auto flow that
Mhm.
happens in Zeppelin. But I have to go and do this extra work to make a
Mhm.
flow in Zeppelin. It's not required, by the way, but I do. If I want this, there's extra friction. I have to go in here and I have to make another flow. And so there is friction. But as we've talked about before, like I think when we were discussing this exact sort of presentation, um, there's an extra cleanliness that you get out of like doing your flows this way. And then again, with the scalability of like with something like Amazon, where I'm having to like deal with like this massive team, as you're showing on the slide, like I can separate that flow out into individual pieces. I can send those pieces to just the team that's responsible for that thing, and then of course
Mhm.
do doc linking.
Right.
And so it's just a much cleaner way
Mhm.
to document this sort of information. Whereas in Figma, frankly, I'm usually treating it as kind of a play space for prototyping.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times what I'm doing in Figma is I'm just prototyping to kind of see like if this is the right interactions, this is the right behavior. It's not really engineering documentation.
Right.
But yeah, I wouldn't be down on anyone's process if they did not use flows in Zeppelin, because there is some additional friction that you need to take
Mhm.
on there. But it just goes to show you that kind of like everything that's built in this tool is purpose built to make that transition from design to development an easier process, like
Mhm.
for engineers to be able to understand like how this project should be broken up, and how it actually works. And I think flows is another good example of like Zeppelin kind of going the extra mile and making
Mhm.
those little extra features that you will not have by default in your Figma flows.
Right. Right.
So we're not looking at spaghetti. So, yeah. Like, so yeah, measuring the impact of our workflow. Yeah, I think all of these are true, by the way. But I'd mentioned this to you, Elliot. Like, my team in particular has grown fourfold. We've really seen an increase in 4x of the number of people that we have on the team just in the past, say, year and a half, 2 years. And we have seen more than a fourfold increase in work and number of projects. And a lot of that is due to the team has just become very prolific. We've got a lot of partner teams coming to us now. So we're seeing even more projects than a full fourfold increase. And we're still handling it. which if you look at the numbers and if you look at 4 designers dealing with this level of work, that's kind of a miracle. And really that comes down to process. Like, when you scale at this size, you have to be more rigid about your processes, and that whether that's design, whether that's like attending code reviews on the designer side, like coming into the engineering code reviews, increasing transparency, designing flows, for example, in that last slide for your engineers. Those are the things that will make or break like a development process at that scale. So
Yeah, no, it's good to hear. I think like one thing that should be said is like, Figma obviously works so much in like just like the design tool world, and like for us, like design to development, that handoff has always been like kind of our like bread and butter, like our only focus. So going, like you mentioned, going that extra mile is kind of like, that's like what we're focused on the most, like is that specific design to development handoff process.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Adam. If anyone wants his LinkedIn, he's got it there on the slide, and we can hop into some Q&A now, if that's good with you.
Yeah, that sounds great, by the way. Yeah.
We got a lot of questions to go through. Let me see.
Yeah, I've been purposely ignoring them, so I apologize in advance. I haven't been looking at the comments because I knew I would just like want to start answering during the presentation, but I'm happy to answer now. So
let's see, what do we start with? Got a lot of upvotes.
And if you say anything negative about me, it's probably true. So
yeah, there's a lot of negativity in this question. Yeah. I'll skip over that.
I thought he would be better looking. So yeah.
So one question I think I see here, this is kind of like a workflow, kind of like a process question, I guess, specifically for you. Oh, I think I lost it. Oh, here it is. Once the product is built by engineers, do designers review it, or is it the job of QA engineers to check that it matches the design?
Very, very good question. I would say it depends on the company. Depends on the company's processes. I would say in general, I don't think, my personal belief is I do not think UX should depend on QA to be the final eyes on the UX. So I make sure that UX is included in the final, like we're lack of a better way of saying it, we're the gatekeepers. I treat the UX as a team. We're the gatekeepers. Like, we're literally on the sign off. We're what we call a required reviewer in our process, and so if we don't sign off, it doesn't go out the door. And I think the reason why I think that is, okay, like I want personally, it'd be great. Yeah, like the huge load off my mind if I've got a great QA team, right? First of all, I'm going to say, like, usually QA is short staffed at most companies. And so that's not always going to, even with the best QA people, they're not going to catch everything. Secondly, you're the one that sat there and designed this entire thing from beginning to end. Maybe you even concepted it. Right. And so you're going to care a ton about how this turns out, and you have bled every pixel and every behavior of that thing. So I personally feel like it is your responsibility as a, obviously this is why UX designers often get called product designers.
Uh-huh.
It is my responsibility as the person that concepted and created that product
Right.
to like see it through to
See
the
it
end and
through.
make sure that customers are getting what I designed.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, I guess like you would be like one of the best people, right? As someone who like basically held its hand. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we're the architects, right? We're the
Mhm.
people that drew up the blueprints. We know for
Right.
sure when something's off. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. I think another workflow question. This one got a lot of upvotes. How do you plan and prioritize tasks across different products? I think calling back to like your what you said, like horizontal amongst verticals, and also, is there a dedicated team for UX research?
Uh wow. Oh my gosh. Do we have another hour? So because I could go into this. So a lot of people on my team, and when I'm saying my team, I'm talking about the four of us.
Mhm.
We have UX researcher experience. A lot of us, like I used to fly out on location with like a tablet and let people use things in person and like note their responses. And so a lot of us have done similar work. And so a lot of times we're just we're our own UX researcher team.
Mhm.
We do in some teams at Amazon have dedicated UX researchers. Like I will
Mhm.
just tell you, my personal team right now does not have one. We're definitely looking. So
Mhm.
if you know anyone, yeah, definitely something that we're looking at.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's and then we have obviously like companies like Amazon. We have dedicated user research like
Mhm.
labs and that sort of thing that we can book time with if we do it enough in advance. So the bigger question, Elliot, and I'll try to keep this like super short,
Mhm.
is how do you plan and prioritize tasks across different products? Um, this is not an easy answer. Like, and this is going to depend on your company, on how many projects you have, on how many employees you have. Um, highly recommend some sort of rigid process there.
Mhm.
And I know Elliot is kind of going outside the bounds of like Zeppelin and a
Mhm.
specific tool use, but highly recommend that you have at least in this kind of situation, I have to treat UX as its own team, kind of as hired guns, hired
Mhm.
contractors. And so I have to take those requests as they come in, have them added to a backlog, and then we do a sprint plan at the end of every sprint, and we pull items from the backlog based on date and
Mhm.
priority and like that sort of thing. And we pull them into the current sprint. We look at the number of points each designer has, and we fill up those points all the way to the maximum.
Mhm.
And then we all execute on those projects. So you just have to have a really good system in place. Like, highly recommend tools like Jira, any sort of project planning tools. But you definitely have to put up a wall. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
some sort of wall, some sort of protection for the
Right.
designers to keep them from being overwhelmed by feature creep and
Uh-huh.
just an enormous amount of tasks coming in from these all sides. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it's really just it's a process thing. If anybody does have questions about that, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's incredibly complicated,
Mhm.
and it's something I think every UX team struggles with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
And for those questions that won't get answered, we won't have time to answer all of these questions, but I'll follow up with Adam. I'll get him to answer all of these, and then we can, send that over along with the recording to everyone who's attending.
of
I
course,
think we
yeah,
have,
I would
yeah,
love to do that. Yeah.
I think we have a time for a few, maybe like two or three more questions, and then we'll let
Mhm.
everyone get out of here. This is like another, I guess, kind of like a process question. How do you sync visual guidelines between designers on the same project?
Wow, I'd almost want more specificity on that question. I visual guidelines between designers on the same project. Essentially, when we have two designers working on the same project, which given the load of our projects is not very often. Actually, it's usually one per project. But we have done this before, and honestly, my answer is kind of going to be the same between design and development. It's transparency, openness. We have all designers working in the same Figma file. And so there's a natural consistency and debate that happens when you have people working on designs right next to each other. In a broader sense, visual guidelines are provided by a larger effort within the company. So you may kind of realize that you're sitting there browsing the Amazon app, you're going to see certain buttons are always the same color, they always look the same, that sort of thing. And so we do have standards teams that enforce design systems from the top down. And so we do have to adhere to those. So once you adhere to those, and then you kind of have other designers within the department checking each other, you end up with generally pretty consistent designs.
Take care of itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a question I like, actually. Something we didn't really touch on is kind of like design systems. So do you use one main design system, or do you have one master that percolates, it's a nice word, into smaller systems on a per project basis?
Yeah. In general, one design system. That just goes down to everything. Again, back to like what a add to cart button on Amazon will always look the same. It's always yellow. It's always like we all know this, right? Like, and we know this because there is a consistent design system. I will say, like, from my knowledge, there's somewhere around 6 to 7 different design systems within the company, and that all just
has their own.
Exactly. Yes, and that all really relates to different product offerings, right? Like we own Twitch, for example, and Twitch has its own design. And so yeah, exactly. So there is, and obviously like sellers and vendors and stuff have a different design system, different sets of mechanisms for getting videos and their content onto Amazon. So
yeah. And one quick note, because I saw design systems. I know Amazon has this built internally, but if you want to track the adoption of your design system, Zeplin just released a new product called onlit.dev. You can check it out today.
Yeah, definitely handy for sure to see the adoption of like on a per component basis. So yeah.
Okay, last question, and this one is spicy, a bit for us, and we have our own thoughts on this, but I'll let you take this one. Do you feel the new dev mode feature in Figma will encroach on the market share of Zeplin? I guess maybe not the market share, but just like from a feature standpoint, how do you view
that? Do I personally feel that dev mode will encroach on market share of Zeppelin? Honestly, probably yeah. It probably will. I know there's even debates. There's debates at a lot of companies about what they're going to do when dev mode comes out. I have mixed emotions. I think in a way, Elliot, like I think all of these, it's kind of a raising all boats sort of situation, right? I think dev mode is bringing more attention to the need for these sort of like tools within, and I think I think dev mode's great. I think for some teams, honestly, I think dev mode's going to work fine. But I do worry about scalability. I like a lot of things that dev mode is doing, which a lot of them are pulled directly from some of the stuff that Zeppelin did. But it's kind of I don't know. I would see dev mode kind of similar to when you get a new phone and it comes with a Notes app. And it's like the Notes app is great. It's awesome. It solves for a lot of people. But then there's kind of like there's these pro apps you can get, and they're the extra, like, they have all of the like dedicated notes features, right? It's really similar with Zeppelin. I mean, I think if you're on a team that's very, very large, especially, I think it is going to be hard to just go to dev mode as it is now. And for all the reasons we just talked about. like Elliot, like all of the stuff that like we looked at with like how messy design files can be, and none of
Mhm.
that changes with dev mode.
Right.
Like it doesn't it doesn't change anything. It doesn't
Yeah.
change that conversation. Um, can teams that are small and highly rigid and highly enforced on like laying their Figma files all out exactly the same, can they survive with dev mode? I think those kind of teams probably can.
Mhm.
But yeah, I continue to look forward. I think this is going to benefit the industry as a whole. You
For
know,
sure.
Elliot, I'm not sure how happy it's going to make y'all, but I think the increased competition is actually going to like,
Mhm.
and I think I've already seen this, honestly. Like, I feel like Zeppelin's really stepping up its game with all these
Mhm.
like little new features, like the
Yeah.
approvals feature and sign
Mhm.
offs and all that. This is like some really nice stuff that like Figma doesn't have. And so I
Mhm.
look forward to a healthy arms race between the two of you.
For sure.
But I think it's going to be a tough decision for a lot of companies, though.
Mhm.
Come next year, I think that's when dev mode is going to start. Like
Charging.
I don't know if they're going to charge for it or what, but yeah, I fully expect if the whole Adobe thing goes through and stuff that the price on dev mode is going to
Yeah.
be pretty high.
Oh, yeah.
And so we'll see. We'll see. Let the best design tool win, so to speak.
Design handoff tool. Yeah.
Design handoff tool
Yeah.
win. But yeah, I think it's a great addition. But a lot of what we said about the confusion and the
Mhm.
chaos between Figma and Zeppelin is still true, even with
Right.
dev mode.
Right. And I'll just leave it at that. Like,
Hmm.
I think you said it well. We do think that it brings more attention to this space. I mean, at config just this past in June, I think the CTO of Figma said like, yeah, Figma's not really been optimized for developers, and like we're like, hallelujah, that's what we've been saying this whole time. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's definitely
I'm glad it's getting attention, right?
yeah,
I'm really glad. It's only going to benefit engineers and designers
and designers, yeah,
that this problem's being acknowledged, and I feel like it was unfortunately just not really, at least by the design tool owners.
hey Nico.
Yeah, fantastic. Hello, both of you. It's good to see you again. I really appreciate both of you so much for today, Adam, especially for you taking the time to come and tell us all about your processes, about all of the things you do. We really appreciate it, and I know all of our attendees really appreciate it as well. So without further ado, I just want to let everybody know, again, too, the recording will be emailed, but let's show Adam and Elliot some love using the emojis at the bottom of the screen. Thank you again so much. And without further ado, I think we can go ahead and actually play a little demo video that Josh has shared in the chat about Omelette to sort of play us out. Again, recording will be
Awesome.
emailed to everybody in case you want to rewatch the session, but thank you so much, Adam and Elliot,
Mhm.
and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day today.
All right. Thanks.
Take care. Thank you, Adam.
Hey there, my name is Josh, and I'm excited to walk you through Omelette, a component analytics tool that eliminates manually measuring your design system usage and helps speed up decision making for component library improvements. All I need to do is run Omelette's command line tool here, and Omelette will parse your code repository and get component and prop usage information. Typically, scanning your code base takes several time-consuming and manual steps, but Omelette takes care of all that for you. And just like that, it's done, and we can take a look at the results here. At the main dashboard, the first chart I see is our overall adoption of our core library over time. But I have several more useful charts right out of the box that give me immediate insight into how my design system is used, such as most used components from my non-core library, you might refer to those as custom components, or least used props. Now let's take a look at the chart showing core versus custom component adoption by project, and I can quickly see which projects or teams are adopting our design system. This is a starting point to understand why one team may be adopting your design system more than others. And of course, from here, you'll have your own questions, and we can answer those by creating your own custom analysis. For example, if our design system has 2 versions and we recently released version 2, I want to know which projects have adopted version 2 or are still on version 1. Omelette makes it easy to analyze my projects. I can filter by tags that I've created, and I have these custom tags for each design system and then break them down for comparison. And now here we have a full view into the design system adoption by version across all my projects. Looks like this project hasn't started adopting version 2 yet. This one is at 28% adoption, and we're looking good with full adoption of version 2 on this project. Omelette not only analyzes your design system adoption, but is also a catalog for all your components and props, whether they're a part of your core design system or custom. Part of my job is to keep track of recently created components, and I'll take a look at a new component here and see where it's used. Now I can get a full view into the dependency tree for this component, and I can see its relationships and can make better decisions on why this component was created, if it should be officially adopted, or determine if it's redundant. I can also get insights into how props are used across my components. So for example, if I see that there's a prop that isn't used in all of the times that this component is used, that's a good signal for me to remove the prop completely and simplify the component. Omelet not only gives me insight into components props, but also which values are sent to each prop. I can use this information to make better decisions on what to add, remove, or adjust in our design system. And that's only a little taste of what we've been cooking up with Omelet and the kind of detailed look into your design system usage it can give you. Omelet is free to try, so have a bite. And I've actually been told not to do any of these egg puns, so I'm kind of taking a big risk here. So check it out, make improvements with confidence, and bring quantifiable insights that help demonstrate the value of your design system. I'm gonna let you go now.